Уважаемые коллеги, еще раз приветствуем всех. Құрметті әріптестер, қайырлы күн. Сіздерді бүгінгі NIS-шер жобасы аясында Кембридж университетінің құрметті профессоры Колин Маклафлинмен дербес білім беру ұйымы Назарбаев Зияткерлік мектептері бірлесіп ұйымдастырып отырған осы вебинарда қарсы алғанымызға қуаныштымыз. Бүгін бізбен бірге біздің қонағымыз Питер Дадли, білім беру саласындағы британдық зерттеуші, Ұлыбританияда lesson study тәсілін енгізудің бастамашылардың бірі және lesson study бойынша дүниежүзілік қауымдастық ұйымының бұрынғы президенті. Welcome, Peter. Hi. Бүгінгі вебинарда Action Research және lesson study тәсілдерінің айырмашылығы мен мектеп тәжірибесінде қолданылуы туралы сөз болады. Спикерлер ағылшын тілінде сөйлейді. Zoom панеліндегі астыңғы жағында глобус суреті бар. Перевод батырмасын бассаңыздар, сіздерге қазақ немесе орыс тілінде аударма таңдауға болады. Спикеры у нас выступают на английском языке, поэтому вы можете прослушивать перевод синхронный, нажав кнопку «Перевод» снизу панели в Zoom. Просим еще раз всех участников отключить микрофоны и задавать вопросы в чате, в тексте, когда будет секция вопроса и ответа. Желаем всем интересной и полезной встречи. And now I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, Professor Colin McLaughlin. Rahmet.
We can't hear you, Colin. Can you please press the mic?
Sorry. Thank you, Miras. Thank you, everybody else. And how wonderful it is to see so many people here today. This is an important topic. It's an important debate. And one of the reasons for holding this is that we feel there is a great deal to clear up. There are some misunderstandings and people are building walls between action research and research lesson study. So I hope we'll be able to clear those up. And we look very much forward to your questions. So please do put them in the chat as we go along. Can I have the slides, please? Okay. So what I'm going to talk about is what's the history? What's the use? What are we doing now in Kazakhstan about using action research for teachers to do their work? Next slide, please. So I want to say that action research is not a particular method. It's not you have to do this, that way, this way. Action research is an approach. It's a mindset. It's a philosophy, if you like. And it comes from the Second World War, actually. After the Second World War, there were a group of very important people, one of whom was Kurt Lewin, who was a psychologist, a philosopher, a writer, and these group of people thought that some of the things that human beings had done to each other during the war had been a really bad thing. And how did this happen? Particularly scientists. How did scientists do terrible things in the name of science to other scientists? So they were trying to develop an approach, a use of science that was different. And it was trying to be something that united practice and research, theory and practice together, not separate. It wanted people to participate. It wanted real problems in the world to be solved. And it wanted to be based on a cycle of reflection, not just opinion, but evidence. And they wanted it to be experimenting, trying things out. But most important, and this quotation is very important, this is from Kurt Lewin: no action without research, no research without action. Next slide, please. And of course, in education, we are subject to a lot of changes, reforms, that are not based on good evidence. The best example I have recently is drinking water. There was an approach in England where all the schools thought everybody should drink a lot more water in school because it would improve teaching and learning. Needless to say, it helped the students because they were drinking a lot of good water, but it didn't really improve teaching and learning. The other thing that's in my country that's influenced things is the work of somebody called Lawrence Stenhouse. And it came from his work in the 1970s on curriculum. He was keen to improve the curriculum and work on the curriculum, develop the curriculum. And he had these things to say, which are really, really important. And politicians could listen to some of these. It is teachers who, in the end, will change the world of school by understanding it. People try to change the classroom from outside. You can't do that because in the end, the ruler of the classroom is the teacher. And Stenhouse argued that we ought to be using teacher research. We ought to be studying the work of teaching and researching it, not leaving it to other people. And all teachers should be involved in this, was his reasoning. So he said that it had three main elements, and I see I've only put two up here. The commitment to questioning one's own teaching. So he said that's what teachers need to do, to think about their teaching and then base their development on that questioning. But it needs to be systematic, and we need to have some evidence. And that teachers need to be helped to develop the commitment, and that's a very important word, the commitment and the skills to study your teaching and to raise questions and to test theory in practice. So this approach is about changing practice, improving things. Next slide, please. So, what were the key aims? What are the key aims of teacher research? First of all, to close the gap between what we're trying to do and the reality of what we're doing. There will always be a gap. That's not a failure. It's the nature of the beast. There will always be a gap between what I hope to do in my life, what I hope to do in my research, and the way I live my life. What we're trying to do is make schools better places for students, for teachers, for parents. So the key aim are those two things: to teach, to help teachers to learn, and for us to realize that our failures are really, really important. Our failures teach us things. What do we learn? We need to experiment. We need not be trying to get it right all the time, but we need to be experimenting, innovating. And mostly we need to be using inquiry to make our decisions. Next slide, please. So this is, if you've ever had anything to do with action research, this is the cycle of action research. And this is what Lewin and Stenhouse and others have meant by, it's a process. You go through a process, and that process should involve thinking and reflecting. I might think about my teaching, and I might, after today, think about my presentation and think, what didn't go well? And what do I need to do? So I make a plan. Then I take some action, and I see if that action has worked. Has it made any difference? And then I start all over again, because it's a never-ending process of learning and problem solving. But it's research by teachers, not on teachers. And that's a very different approach. Research is not just something done by specialists and experts who don't teach, who don't know the realities of the daily life of the school. Next slide, please. So this is Stenhouse's definition, and it's very simple, but difficult. systematic inquiry made public. Now, what he meant by that was, yes, inquire, think, explore your teaching and the students' learning, but it must be systematic. You can't say, I think I'm doing really well in that class. I spoke to one student and they said that what I'm doing is brilliant. I need to talk to more than one student. I need a way of inquiring that's systematic. And the made public is important. It's not writing a paper for a conference. It's about sharing what you see and sharing it so that your colleagues will give you some critical feedback. You will be discussing it. So it's a collaborative activity. You don't do this totally on your own. Next slide, please. So, made public is not about writing a paper. It can be writing a paper, and presenting at a conference can be a very good thing. But it's more about creating knowledge together, sharing with your colleagues, creating knowledge in the school, having critical debates, and trying to change things. And yes, when all of that needs to be written about, I'm discovering that one of the most powerful ways is to share it via video. However we share doesn't matter as long as we are sharing. Next slide, please. So what we're doing in the NIS Share project with NIS is different. We are trying to move it up a gear. We're moving it up a big gear. It's a big step. We're trying to say, what happens if a whole school does it together? And if they use action research or teacher inquiry, it doesn't matter what you call it, to actually help them shape their practice and their policy, instead of just what somebody else says or an opinion, but actually using it to make the whole school work together in harmony on similar aims. Now that means you have to know something about leadership and you have to know something about change, because how those things happen in school is not easy. It's very complicated. Schools are very complex organizations. So it needs leadership, and it definitely needs the support of the senior leaders in the school. If it doesn't have that, it won't work. And it needs an understanding of change. And change is not a fast process. And because people nowadays want to do everything quickly, doesn't mean it happens quickly. We're trying to add that understanding in. We're trying to add in the idea that schools will develop a vision of what good teaching and learning is, and that will actually inform their work. And what I'm beginning to understand is probably the most important thing, is the last one, which is, how do we create the conditions in a school for teachers to be able to do this? This is really difficult. If you start something new, you have to stop something old. You have to make space. And we're discovering that that is a very difficult task. And it requires commitment, and it requires a long-term commitment. So that's what we're trying to do in this project, which is a big, big step up from just one teacher doing action research in one classroom. We'll see how we do, and we're very happy to share what we're doing, because we will try and research it as well. Next slide, please. So I want to finish, because you're hearing what I'm saying, but what we've asked schools to do is, after the first year, we asked the schools to do a video of their work and to write a case study. And those are available on the NIS website. So let's finish with this 2-minute video by one of the schools, NIS Tadikogan. Thank you. Let's watch the video.
Размышляя о важности программы NIS-те, я поделюсь значимыми изменениями, которые мы заметили после 1 года участия. Во-первых, встречи команды Share состояли из регулярных рефлексивных дискуссий о преподавании и обучении, хотя раньше времени на обдумывание школьной практики было недостаточно. Во-вторых, действия, предпринятые в ходе исследования, активизировали и увеличили разговоры о качестве преподавания и обучения среди учителей. И третье, программа Share, мы замечаем, что она меняет наше понимание преподавания и обучения в школе. Размышляя о своей роли директора в программе в целом и в команде Share в частности, я поделюсь наиболее важными лидерскими действиями. Формирование команды Share было важным этапом, которому мы уделили особое внимание. Также я позиционировал себя как активный и равноправный член команды, старался поддерживать ролевую модель по участию в обсуждениях и принимаемых инициативах. И в команде Share мы реализовали распределенное лидерство на разных уровнях. Так, например, координатор работала со школьными лидерами по исследованию. Заместитель директора организовала работу с молодыми учителями. А другие члены команды организовали мероприятия образовательный хакатон и провели сбор качественных данных для нашего исследования в действии. В своих действиях мы также задействовали почти всех учителей школы в различные мероприятия, фокус-группы, менторскую работу. Конечно, не все было идеально. Был упущен административный контроль за установлением выделенного времени в расписании учителей для лидеров по исследованиям, и, соответственно, создание благоприятных условий для их работы заняло около 3 месяцев. И командой мы пришли к пониманию, что масштаб нашего исследования оказался слишком большим и расплывчатым. Вероятно, мы бы смогли получить более качественный результат исследования, если сфокусировались бы на вопросах меньшего масштаба. Я связываю это с моей позицией директора и активным участием в команде, где мое намерение охватить больше учителей и провести более масштабные действия на уровне школы повлияло на решение команды о выборе вопросов нашего исследования. Это говорит о том, что роль и вовлеченность директора крайне важны, но нужно быть очень внимательным к неявному влиянию директора на работу всей команды.
Okay, so let me just finish with a few comments. The reason that video is so good, in my view, is the reflective head teacher, willing to accept that it's difficult, willing to acknowledge the successes and the challenges. On the topic of what's the difference between teacher lesson study and action research, in my view, none. They are different ways of doing similar things, although we are trying to do some particular things in this project. But Pete Dudley is much better qualified to talk about this than I am, so I'll happily hand over to Pete.
Colleen, thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we
Great.
can hear you.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Well, Karoli Kun, Dobry Den, good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to see so many familiar faces and names. I will talk about lesson study, and I will build on, I hope, I won't be disagreeing with anything Colleen has said, but I will try to make some distinctions between things that are particular to lesson study and are not particular to action research. So could we see the slides, please, Altingu? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so that's what I'm going to focus on. So we can move to the next slide. Thanks. So the origins of lesson study go back a long way, before the Second World War, to the 1870s in Japan, which was opening up to the world and modernizing. And it had Japanese politicians, as they became after the reinstitution of the Meiji period, a revolution in Japan, had studied science, technology, government in a number of countries, including the UK. And they introduced a nationwide education system. And they wanted to use the ideas that they'd they had themselves through Confucian heritage of striving for perfection, never reaching perfection, but always sharing the improvements that they've made. And you will, any of you who have done martial arts, Japanese martial arts, will be familiar with that concept. They wanted to infuse those ideas with the ideas of science, constantly moving forward towards improvement through gathering data, analyzing, and making a change. And what they came up with in schools was something called Juji Kenkyu, which is lesson study. And it was developed really by teachers, for teachers, and for use in schools. Next slide, please. Next slide, Artingul, please. In Japan, when you're involved in a traditional Japanese lesson study, a large group of teachers will collaboratively plan a lesson. It may take some time, and lots of it will be done via email. They will have they will gradually refine the lesson. They will be focusing on something they're not happy with in the learning of their students, and a teacher will teach the research lesson, and they may invite lots of people in from other schools, from the school district. They may invite experts in the subject that the lesson study is focusing on, and they will conduct their research lesson, and then that will be followed by quite a formal discussion about but where everybody will give their views on what worked, what they're going to take away. So there's a combination of collaboration there, of making their research public, which was a very strong part of Colleen's presentation. Lawrence Stenhouse was a huge influence on me as well. But they make sure there are people with enough knowledge of pedagogical content knowledge of the subject, for example, in the room to make sure that there's a good quality of debate. 150 years on, lesson study is still happening in about 2/3 of Japanese schools, probably 3/4 of its elementary schools. Most universities with education departments are interested in lesson study, will support lesson studies. Many have their own particular view or approach to lesson study. So lesson analysis in Nagoya, workshop style in Osaka, lesson study for learning community in Tokyo. After the revolution in China in the 1945, they borrowed lesson study. They do it at district level, and they focus on sequences of lessons. And they'll work with groups of schools, and they'll go into their schools. They'll carry out research lessons and come back and share what they've learned together. In the 1990s in the States, Catherine Lewis, who lived in Japan, and Akihiko Takahashi and others started to introduce Japanese lesson study into the US, and they now run collaborative lesson research, which runs in the UK as well and in parts of Europe. And Ferenc Marton and Munling Lo in Hong Kong and Sweden developed learning study from lesson study. But the one which has taken root really across NIS schools in much of Kazakhstan is research lesson study, which I developed from experiencing lesson study in about 1984 when I was a young teacher, but not knowing that it was lesson study, knowing that it was something from Japan. And so I developed a version that would work in the UK, where there was much greater fear really of teaching in public, because when one has other professionals in the room with you in England, it tends to mean you're being inspected, or your teaching performance is being managed and judged, and that does not make the right conditions that Colin was talking about. It doesn't create the right conditions for experimentation, for learning together. So next slide, please. So a long process through the 90s, and then a big national pilot ended up with a version that does work in the UK. It's in fact spread across Europe, most of Western Europe, and it's very popular in Kazakhstan. And it consists of a cycle of research lessons, not just one. The teachers plan together, they teach together and observe together, they interview their pupils at the end of the lesson together, and they sit down immediately afterwards and they talk about the learning of particular pupils that they've predicted what would happen. What do we think if this lesson that we've introduced an innovation into goes well for these case pupils? What we'll be expecting them to do? And then in the post-lesson discussion, the first thing they discuss are those pupils and what they actually saw as compared with what they predicted. And that keeps the focus on the learning and the students and away from being critical of the teacher. And that was a big change in the UK. And I think it's one reason why lesson study is popular with teachers. Another reason is that you're doing it together. You're not doing it in front of a big audience. You're doing it as a group of 2 or 3, preferably 3, and you are in a safe place. And in fact, teachers in the lesson study will deliberately sign up to a protocol where everyone is equal, where everything anyone says will be treated with respect and positive regard, where the intention is that everyone will feel their contributions are valued, they will make contributions, and while they won't agree with each other all the time, they will strive for agreement. And they use something called exploratory talk when they're doing that. But when you sign up for that kind of agreement where everyone is equal, and we will not discuss what we do in the lesson study unless we all agree that those things can be discussed when we make it public, you can have school leaders in a lesson study group with a new teacher in their first year of teaching, with people who've been teaching for however long, and it works. You get and what you've got in the red circles there are all the opportunities for teachers to engage in exploratory talk, to create knowledge about teaching. And we know that the quality of dialogue in lesson studies is what helps teachers to integrate what they discover into their subsequent practice. Next slide, please. One thing, we've missed the title of this slide. I don't know what's happened to that. So the title of this slide is that lesson study is designed, research lesson study is designed for the making explicate, making conscious the knowledge that we use when we're in the classroom. Something that is different for teachers from other professions is that most of the decisions we will take in a day-to-day lesson will be taken automatically. We won't be aware of the decisions we're taking. We won't be able to remember a lot of what we've done because we did it on automatic pilot, because classrooms are so fast moving, so unpredictable, and so complex. And research lesson study is designed to help make each other, by working together in a collaborative group, by predicting and then observing what we predicted, we make explicate, we make explicit the things that we normally have filtered out and we don't see in our lessons. And that's one of the powers of research lesson study. And when we're in our group, when we're in our post-lesson discussions, having also talked to get the students' views of what worked and how they might suggest changing it if we taught it again the next day to a similar group. Those things help to make the invisible visible, and we become aware of our contact, of our practice collaboratively. We change it, and through sharing it, which is also an important part of lesson study, it was the final circle in that diagram, when we share it with our colleagues, we reinforce those changes ourselves. We become doubly aware of the changes we're going to make and how our practice will change. And that leads to significant changes in subsequent practice, and it leads to improvements in student learning. Next slide, please. And again, we've lost the title of this slide, so somewhere in the translation process, which is a shame. So this slide is called the distinguishing features of research lesson study, and I'll try and tease out what's different from action research, because lesson study is very closely aligned with action research. Before I knew about lesson study, I carried out action research. I was part of the Classroom Action Research Network, which Colleen was also part of 30 years ago, 40 years ago now probably, led by John Elliott when I was working, because Lawrence Stenhouse had sadly died. So first of all, I think in a research lesson study, teachers collaborate face-to-face, if possible, together. I know we developed a methodology during COVID in Kazakhstan where it could be done online, and that was amazing. We learned a lot, but it's better if you're in the room, because the way we learn together in a lesson study is fast-moving, and it's almost visceral, it's almost bodily, that we learn. And when we're building the practice back into our automated teaching, we embody it. So it's important that there's close proximity and close collaboration. It's very focused on classroom learning. Of course, action research, you could carry out research on your resources, on how the library is supporting teaching in the class, all sorts of things you could look at. But in a lesson study, you come back to the practice. It's close to practice, to quote Lawrence Stenhouse. It's highly dialogic. You build the knowledge together. It often sounds very messy when teachers are doing analyzing why something worked or didn't work in a research lesson study in the way they thought, and hypothesizing about what they could do in the next one. And they'll be drawing on knowledge from the long distant past, and they'll be drawing on the knowledge of what they're going to do next week. And the children in the class, and piecing it all together. It's called meaning-oriented teacher learning. People do it career long, ideally school-wide, because a school that does lesson study systematically and shares it doesn't have to do a lot of other things, and you'll discover this on your project. So you don't have to do school self-evaluation in the same way, because you're doing that through your lesson studies. You don't have to do performance management of teachers. They're doing it, and they're telling you how they've learned, what they've learned. Outcomes change schools and schools' curriculum. When Stenhouse was talking about changing the curriculum, he wasn't just talking about the content. He included in his conception of the curriculum the teaching and the content together. But it is important to record what you've learned so it can be shared well. Most lesson studies in the world, I think, really, including Japan, get shared with the colleagues in their school and perhaps those who come to an open lesson. They don't get shared beyond. And that has meant that we are very slow in building system-wide knowledge from all that work that's going on in schools. But if we collect them through small videos, through however we collect them, we need to make it searchable. We are able, and we are showing that through Camtree's work. Our research lesson study is very closely related to design science, where in design science, which came originally from aeronautics, where you need to improve an aeroplane in flight full of people, but you can't really do too much experimentation because you can't have an aeroplane full of people crashing, and a classroom is like an aeroplane full of people, an airplane full of children. So we have to design it in a safe way. We tweak and we adjust and we discuss and we try again. We're very accountable to the learning of the children. So it's a very safe way to improve learning for children. And in many places now, they're also including the students in the process themselves, not just through interviews at the end of research lessons, but in redesigning the next research lesson. So it's safe. Teachers enjoy it. They get a lot of professional closeness and professional development from it, and they get a lot of fulfillment. So it's close to design science. It's very close, as we've discussed, to action research. I don't think there's any difference between them other than the way that lesson study has been honed, or research lesson study has been honed to deal with aspects of teacher learning and data gathering which are made difficult by the nature of classrooms. So lesson study collections and syntheses and you've started doing this in Kazakhstan, can, when put together, can inform wider policy. Certainly in the UK, in my work at policy level, teacher research was viewed as something that only rather geeky teachers would do. It wasn't something that people saw as a mainstream activity. I think policymakers' eyes have been woken up to that. Could we change slide, please? Have been woken up to that by a number of international reports focusing on countries where they do make a big difference, and those include Japan, where lesson studies are synthesized by local universities. And so we've created Camtree, which specifically exists to support, publish, curate, and make public syntheses of teacher research, close to research. And that collection, which is now about 750, is mainly comprised of lesson studies and action research. And there's a wonderful Kazakh collection that's growing on Camtree. So I don't think I've said anything that conflicts with Colleen's presentation. It's clearly something that has to be driven by the leadership of the school. It works most effectively, and it's sustainable most effectively when all the schools in a district do it, and they use the same kind of lesson study, because then it's easy for them to understand and to even participate in each other's lesson studies. And the whole system comes to expect, as part of its cycle of renewal and its cycle of improvement, it comes to expect those lesson studies to be the harvesting, really, of the information and the new practice which is going to push things forward. And a lot of those other things that we do in the name of school improvement are being done through this much more efficient and effective and innovative and creative and enjoyable process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colleen and Pete, for wonderful presentations. And now we have time, around 20 minutes, for question and answers. Құрметті әріптестер, бізде қазір сұрақ-жауап уақыты 20 минутымыз бар. Сондықтан да эксперттер осында сіздер үшін сұрақтарыңыз болса, чатқа жазуларыңызға болады, немесе ағылшын тілінде бірден микрофонды жағып қойсаңыздар болады. Сұрақ бар ма, әріптестер? Мүмкін практика жүзінде жұмыс жасағанда сұрақтар бар шығар. Менторский сессиялар өтті, сұрақтар өте көп болды. Сондықтан да қазір сұрақтарды қоюға тамаша мүмкіндік. Colleen, Pete, we are expecting questions. If people have questions, and we'll take them.
Please.
If some people have used different approaches, it'd be interesting to hear what their experience is. It may be that people don't have a question, but if somebody just wants to tell us, it would be very interesting to hear. Anybody want to do that? Anybody want to share your experience?
We have a question after this.
Hello, and thank you. I have a question. In our school, we are required to conduct lesson study in the beginning of our teaching experience, and then we proceed with action research later on as our career grows. So is it really necessary to differentiate and to start with lesson study and then to have action research?
I think Colleen and I both agree on the answer to this. Colleen, do you want to give your answer?
Go ahead, then I'll find out how I disagree.
Oh, fine. Okay. Well, I'm not sure why anybody would want to move from one to the other. I think both have a purpose, and in countries which use lesson study, they use them throughout their careers. I once went to the retirement party for a teacher who was a wonderful mathematics teacher who retired at the age of 65. And he said his only regret, and he was a lifelong teacher researcher, his only regret was that he didn't discover lesson study until he was 60, because he enjoyed it so much and he got so much from doing the lesson studies. So I don't think it's something which we should think about in terms of it is good for beginning teachers. I know that Toshiya Chichibu has done a lot of work in Kazakhstan on the early career approach in Japan, where they use lesson studies for early career pre-service and early career teaching. But if, you know, I've just come back from Japan, I was with teachers who have been practicing lesson study throughout their careers, a head teacher who's about to retire. And she's very sad to retire because she said, I will miss the lesson studies more than anything else. And she used lesson study for building learning community in her school. So I think there may be ways that you, as I gave you an example, that you might want to examine the effect of different policies that you have as a school or different resources that you use as a school on teaching and learning. And then it might be good to do action research cycles in relation to studying the resources or studying the policy, and then combine it with what does this look like in classrooms. But I would probably create something that was a combination of action research and lesson study there.
I think your question is a very important one, because it's a question that people believe in Kazakhstan, and it makes me think that this probably came from some policy somewhere, because practice is shaped by the environment, by things that people say. So, for example, the fact that attestation criteria have people have to write a paper has led in Kazakhstan to many people thinking that's what they have to do. It's not good enough unless you've written a paper, published it in a journal, and had it and presented it at a conference. So I think your question is probably the reason we're doing this webinar, actually. And so I want to take it very, very seriously. I agree with Pete. I don't know where he thinks we disagree, but I agree totally with what he said. There is no reason why you should distinguish between an early career teacher and an experienced teacher and their inquiry. The important thing for me is that they are inquiring. That's the really important thing. I think there are some things about lesson study that might make it attractive. So, for example, I think the structured nature of it might make it seem accessible to schools and teachers. And I don't mean by that it isn't accessible, but I think that might be attractive to people who want a structure, tight structure. Let's be clear what I think I'm doing. I think I'm trying, most important of all, to get teachers to reflect on their practice. And second most important of all, to act on that reflection. Not just to think about it and talk about it when they get home, but actually to change the practice. And it's really helpful if that is informed by ideas and critical thinking. So we don't just implement every idea we have. So I think there is a very important question about any inquiry, or any research and the approaches we use, which is it fit for purpose? What are we trying to do? And if I'm trying to do that, is this the best way to do it? And there are lots of ways in which research can be used, inquiry can be used, methods can be used, talking to students. Student voice work is one of the most powerful forms of inquiry. So I agree with Pete, use them all. Get to be an expert in all of this work. Aim to try to use lots of different methods, but to ask the question, am I finding out what I need to find out? Why am I doing this? What's the purpose of this? I don't think, again, I come back and I'll finish with, thank you for the question first, because that's the most important question. And second, and it's brave to say it, by the way, and second, don't be seduced into thinking one method is better than another. This is not a competition. This is not a competition between different approaches. And that's one of the problems, that some people are saying, no, my way is best. No, my way is best. No way is best. The question is, what are you trying to do? And are you using the best way to do that? So thank you very much. I think it was Actoby, was it? Thank you.
Yeah, can I add something for clarification? I think something got lost in between the translation from my English. But I said, I don't think Colleen and I disagree on this.
Oh, okay. That's my ears.
I don't think we agree.
I'm getting old.
So I completely agree. And just to give an example, I'm doing a piece of work with about 40 schools at the moment. And they are studying children's use of exploratory talk in different subjects. And this is something which I know many of you have done in Kazakhstan. And before they do the lesson study, they're spending about 7 weeks using listening logs in their classrooms to listen to every child in different activities, so that they have listened to every child, maybe 30 children, by the end of the 7 weeks. They do about 3 a week. And that's something they're coming together, they're discussing what they found. It's not a lesson study. It's more like 7 cycles of action research as they go through observing those children and learning about the way they're using talk, not using talk, how they thought they were, not how they thought they were. But it's a very important precursor to their lesson study, because they're going to do a better lesson study because they've done all that reflective practice, finding out about how the children in their class are using talk. It's a good example of combining lesson study and action research in a productive way.
Thank you very much, Pete and Colleen, for your answers. We also have another question in the chat. What basic literature would you recommend? And also another question here, how much time lesson study cycle maybe usually take?
I think that we could share some. I think it already probably exists on the website, but it's possible to recommend some reading. And Pete, I leave the question on lesson study to you.
Yes, I can't see the question on lesson study, Altingo. Could you repeat it? I'm sorry.
How much time does lesson study usually take? I think they mean once.
Okay. Well, it takes some time because you need about 4 teacher meetings, and you need, if you do a 3 lesson study, you need to get 3 teachers into the same classroom for a period of about half an hour over. So it would typically take 3 weeks, and it would require those teachers to meet together for a total of about 5 hours.
Thank you.
And I can
But you
see
get 3
questions.
teachers.
Sorry.
Oh, yes. Ah,
I can see questions
go on.
about, we will make this presentation available. So,
Yeah.
because I'm sorry, but we've reached our capacity, and so I'm aware that some people can't see it, but they will be able to see the recording.
Yeah. And also, Raigul, you messaged that you have a question. You can turn on your mic if you are with us. Okay, there is another question while Raigul is... Raigul.
Аха. Саламатсыз ба? Мен Астана НИШ ФМН. Менде мынадай сұрақ бар да. Мен химия пәнінің мұғалімі. Педагогикалық өтілім 35 жыл. Химиядан сабақ беріп келе жатырмын. Әдістемелік бірлестік жетекшісі. Енді мен биылғы жылы осы бірлестікте 2 мұғалімді зерттеуге алып, зерттеу жүргізіп жатырмын да. Ол зерттеуімнің атауы былай декреттен шыққан мұғалімдерге менторлық көмек көрсету. И одан кейін сол зерттеудің ішінде менде тағы да зерттеу бар да. Сол мұғалімдермен бірге мен lesson study жүргізіп жатырмын. И одан кейін сол lesson study'ді и жаңағы менің ойым, бастапқы мақсатым, сол мұғалімдерге менторлық көмек көрсету, және ол мұғалімдерге сол менторлық көмектің қандай әдістері ең тиімді болып табылады. Сонда менде зерттеудің ішіндегі зерттеу осылай жасау дұрыс па?
Рахмет, Райгүл, сұрағыңыз үшін.
Мен Қарлығашпын.
Қарлығаш, okay. So, yeah, the question from Қарлығаш, she is from NIS Physics and Math School in Astana. She's sharing that she's a chemistry teacher.
Yeah, we got it out, I think.
Oh, okay, good.
No, I haven't got it. Sorry.
Oh,
Keep
sorry.
going out and go.
Yeah. She's a chemistry teacher with 35 years of experience, and also she's a head of methodological department in her school. And now she's working with 2 other teachers to do research, how to support and mentor teachers that came from maternity leave, that are back to school after maternity leave. And she's planning to do lesson study with them, and she wants to know what are the best approaches to work with them, and if she use action research and lesson study as the approach to work with them. This will be right?
Do you want to go first, Colin? Or?
Well, I think approaches, especially with somebody who's not used to it, that are straightforward and simple at the beginning, which help. It's not rocket science, I don't think. It's how to get a teacher to start to think about their classroom practice. And it might be that you just undertake a simple inquiry at the beginning. And I think working together would be the other important thing. So I think she talked about 3. So working as a group and maybe agreeing, and then you can use either lesson study or action research or other methods to say, what are we concerned about? What am I as a teacher concerned about? What is it that I think I could do better? Or it doesn't have to be a huge problem, but what is going well in my classroom? What is not going well in my classroom? What do I want to focus on? And I go back to the video of what Victor said. He said, keep it focused, make it specific. Don't start big and wide. It's too difficult. And it's very difficult to explore a huge area, a huge question. So that would be what I would say.
Thanks, Colleen. I agree. I think Colleen has made some really good suggestions there in terms of focusing it on the things that they are concerned about in their classrooms. And and keeping that focus. Lesson study is used by many schools for induction of new teachers, and you are really talking about reinduction of teachers who've been off. I think if you can use the protocol, the talk protocol, where, because you're very experienced and you're the head of department and you're the head of research, you might be quite scary, Rahul. I'm sure you're not, but if you can say to them, look, in this inquiry that we can do together, we will focus on the things you want to focus on. I will be with you and I will be learning. So we're all learning, and nothing we will treat everybody their contributions will be valued and will be valuable in this, so that they are set at their ease. And of course, there's two of them who are working on this together, so they will feel secure in that they have the same experience of returning to school after a gap. And I think just let them focus on the things that they want to focus on in their particular classrooms, and you could do a small lesson study, even just 2 lessons in one of their classrooms with all three of you, and then in another of their classrooms, focusing on the things that it may be the curriculum's changed, or it may be there are new children or whatever. But I think it's a very safe way of doing exactly this kind of thing. So I would encourage it.
Can I just add one thing, which I think is really important everywhere, but it's also showing itself to be very important in Kazakhstan. School teachers are used to being told what to do. They are used to being inspected. That has become much more important in education across the world. And so I spent yesterday talking to teachers in schools trying to develop this work. And the biggest issue was to get people to start. And the reason was because they're frightened. Inquiry is frightening. To say to a teacher, what do you think is the problem in your school, is a dangerous question. And teachers are frightened by that. And I think what Peter was talking about is making it safe. How can we make it safe for teachers to learn? How can we make it safe for teachers to explore when everybody around them is making them perform? Do it right, don't do it wrong. And when you've got that language of right and wrong, it's very difficult to get teachers to have trust in asking questions and having freedom to ask questions. They don't know what to do with that. That's a new freedom. So I think the context is really important. It's important to ask the question, what messages do we send to teachers in my school? How do they feel about their practice? Is it okay to make a mistake? Those are important questions. Thanks.
Can I just add a funny end to that, Colleen?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny but true. A colleague of mine, a head teacher, who adopted lesson study, decided that she was getting all the information she needed to improve her school from lesson study. So she stopped doing formal monitoring observations of her teachers. There was no need. They were telling her much more than she ever got from that, about what they'd learned and how from their lesson studies. But then one day, the national inspection team arrived at the school unannounced, and the lead inspector went into her office and demanded to see lots of files, finance, results, all sorts of things, staffing. And he asked to see her monitoring teaching file. And she hadn't got one because she gave up monitoring teaching formally when she started lesson study. So she says she went into her office and took the lesson study folder out of her drawer, and she tore off the label and threw it away and put a new label on, and then wrote on it, monitoring teaching, and gave the inspectors the lesson study folder. And they were so impressed with this wonderful approach to monitoring teaching that she got outstanding and was one of the best schools of the year. So I think we have to think about the quality of what we do when we're doing our own classroom research, particularly collaborative classroom research. Well, if you have 3 teachers and they've all been teaching 20 years, you've got 60 years of collective experience. It's high quality things that you're doing. So we need to be confident also about what we get from our lesson studies.
Over to you, Altengul.
Thank you, Pete. So we only have, I know it's already time is over, but we still have questions in the chat. I think about 2 or 3 more questions. But maybe we could save chat questions and keep in touch with others since everybody plans their time. So thank you for all participating, especially for NIS helping organizing this and also the translation. Colleen and Pete, thank you very much for your valuable time and making this time for our Kazakh schools. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And we will share the recording with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Altengul.